Lin Xiaoran was wearing a simple white t-shirt and denim pants, and wearing a pair of old white sneakers on his feet, walking slowly on the streets of the night market. The air is filled with the fragrance of skewers, the shouts of the little girl and the laughter of the crowd, which makes people feel warm. She held a bunch of candied haws in her hand and took a bite. The sweet and sour taste spread in her mouth, making her unable to help but squint her eyes. After, you can go quickly. There is a handmade sack in front of you. It looks so beautiful. Gu Chenfeng urged her from a few steps ahead, and a thrilling slut was hanging on her face. She was wearing a dazzling yellow dress and a small straw hat on her head, which looked like she was on a vacation at the night market. It's here, don't worry. Xiaoran responded with a smile and speeded up his pace. Actually, she didn't like crowded places, but Chenfeng could drag her out every time. She couldn't resist saying that living is a bit hot, so she could only accompany her to accompany her. The lights in the night market are full of all kinds of gadgets, from hair toys to handmade earrings. As soon as Chenfeng was walking through the crowd, I stopped to see the touch of the one, and felt quite relaxed. Just as she lowered her head and chose a handwritten red chain, a familiar and unfamiliar voice suddenly came to her ears. After all? She was stunned for a moment, and the red squid in her hand almost fell to the ground. This sound was filled with a little warmth, as if I had heard it a long time ago countless times, but it was so long that she almost forgot its existence. She slowly raised her head, looked in the direction of the sound, and then froze. Standing in front of her was Gu Chenfeng. He was wearing a black casual jacket, a white shirt and a camera hanging on his shoulders, looking random and professional. His face was still so beautiful, and his eyebrows were the same as her memory, but he was a little more mature and calm than when he was a child. Those eyes, like before, will slightly swell into a crescent shape when they smile, making people feel particularly comfortable. Chenfeng? Xiaoran couldn't believe his eyes, and there was a slight tremor in his voice. She thought she would never see him again, but it had been 8 years since the day they separated. It's really you. Gu Chenfeng smiled, smiling a little like when he was a child, with a little slutty and gentleness. He walked closer, looked at her with his head down, and the camera in his hand swayed lightly. I thought I was wrong, and I didn't expect to meet you here. Suddenly, I felt like I was hit by something in my heart, and I couldn't say that I was surprised or panic. She subconsciously clasped the red tree in her hand, and the brain was full of pictures from childhood. Those days when they ran to the alley together, stole the plums of the grandma's house next door, and wrote the bamboo horse agreement under the tree seemed to have all come up all of a sudden. After all, why are you stupid? Who is this? Gu Chenfeng didn't know when she had passed away, and looked at Gu Chenfeng curiously, her eyes full of gossip. This is. After returning to his senses, he wanted to introduce it, and Gu Chenfeng had already spoken first. I am her friend when she was a child, Gu Chenfeng. He smiled and pointed at Chenfeng a little, then looked at Xiaoran again. I haven't seen it for a long time. What's the way you did? It's okay. Xiaoran smiled hard, and his brain was still in a bad mood. She didn't know what to say, but it's been 8 years since they had been in contact with each other for a long time. There was something wrong with her family that year and she moved out of the alley. The advertisements didn't even have time to say a word, so they broke up contact. She thought he had forgotten her for a long time, but after all, he was so good later that he heard that he had become some famous photographer. What can you do? It's been boring these years. I know that I'm going to and from get off work every day, and I haven't even gotten married with my boyfriend. Gu Chenfeng said and covered her mouth and giggled, noticing that Xiaoran's face was almost red. Chenfeng. Xiaoran glared at her, wishing to find a quiz to diamond. Jane Chenfeng was embarrassed and smiled, as if he hadn't heard Chenfeng's comments. He asked casually, Are you walking in the night market? Why don't you have a walk together? I'm just right here to have a scene, so I can chat. After hesitating for a moment, Chenfeng was already excited. Okay, we don't have any goals, right? She was pushed by her and could only stick to her head. So, the three of them walked shoulder to shoulder in the crowd at the night market, as if they were going back in time and back to the days when they were wandering around together when they were young. While walking with a camera, Gu Chenfeng took a photo of some small scenes on the road. He would occasionally stop to adjust the lens. He thought it really made him unable to help but take a few more glances. He seemed to have changed a lot, but it seemed to have not changed at all. I still like to record life and still have so much sunshine, but I talk less than before. When I occasionally look at her, there are some emotions that she can't understand. Are you doing photography now? Suddenly, he couldn't help but open his mouth and broke the silence. Well, a freelance photographer usually takes some commercial photography and will take photos of things you like yourself. Gu Chenfeng lowered his head and adjusted the camera, answering indifferently, "Where are you? Did you hear that you learned design?" It was a little bit, yes, it's quite ordinary to do graphic design in a small company. It's good to be average, it's suitable for you. He raised his head and smiled at her, with a gentle look that was indescribable. Suddenly, my heart hopped, and I moved my eyes tightly, and looked at the position on the road with my lower head. She didn't know why, and she always thought there was something different in his sentence, but she didn't dare to think too much. They walked and came to a relatively remote path behind the night market. There are many fewer people here and the lights are dimming. There are several old trees on the road, with a few small tiles under the trees selling handmade artifacts and old gadgets. Gu Chenfeng stopped walking, took a camera and took a few photos of the tree-shaped shadows, then turned to Xiaoran and said, "This place is quite touching. If you stand over, I'll take a photo of you." "Ah. I can't do it, I won't put on the mirror." Suddenly, he hurriedly raised his hand and wrote a refusal on his face. "Try it, I'm sure it's good to take a photo." Gu Chenfeng smiled and pulled her under the tree, half-forcedly let her stand, then lifted the camera and adjusted the angle seriously. I was standing there, feeling uncomfortable and didn't know where to put my hands. She looked at the wind behind the lens and suddenly felt indescribable. It seemed that time really flowed backwards. When he was a child, he always took her to run away and said that he wanted to take the best photos of her. "Okay, smile." The voice of Gu Chenfeng came from behind the lens, with a bit of coaxing language. He suddenly pulled the corners of his mouth hard, but he heard a light smile. "Don't be so stiff, relax, and think about the things we played together when we were young." When I mentioned it, a bunch of pictures flashed through my brain. She remembered that once, they caught a cat in the alley, and two people fed it with food, and named it Fire Fire because its eyes were as bright as smoke. Later, the cat disappeared, and they cried together for a long time. They agreed that if they saw it again in the future, they must take it home. Thinking of this, she couldn't help laughing, smiling a little sincerely and with some thoughts. "Yes, that's it." Gu Chenfeng pressed the door, then looked down at the screen, and satisfied with the head, "It's great, I feel it." I just wanted to go over to see the photos, and suddenly I heard a low voice coming from afar, as if someone was talking in a low voice, or as if it was a whisper. She was stunned for a moment, looked around, but she didn't find anything unusual. "Did you hear any sound?" she asked Chenfeng, with a little doubt in her language. "Sound? No." Gu Chenfeng raised his head and looked around. "Maybe it's the sound, this place is quite erratic." It was a little bit late, and I always felt a little uneven in my heart. At this moment, she suddenly felt her wrist hot. When she looked down, she realized that the red chain she had just bought had put on her wrist. The red rays radiated a strange light under the dim light. "That's..." She raised her eyebrows and reached out to try to untie the sprout, but found that she couldn't untie it. "What's wrong?" Gu Chenfeng noticed her movements, walked over and looked down, and was stunned. "Where is this chain? I haven't seen you wear it." "I don't know, I just picked it in my hand, and then..." Before I finished speaking, I suddenly felt dizzy in my brain, and the scene in front of me seemed to be twisted by something, making it blurry and strange. She closed her eyes subconsciously, and heard the lowly voice again on her ears, which became clearer this time, as if she was talking about language she couldn't understand, with an inexplicable sense of pressure. "After all, are you okay?" Gu Chenfeng's voice was a little anxious. He reached out to hold her shoulder, his face full of worry. I suddenly opened my eyes tightly and realized that the world in front of me had changed. The old trees, stairs, and even the lights on the road seemed to be covered by a thin fog, vaguely. And between her and Gu Chenfeng, a hidden red line suddenly appeared, extending from her wrist to his wrist, as if tightly connecting them together. "Chenfeng, have you seen this?" She pointed to the red line, her voice trembling. Gu Chenfeng looked over her hand and raised an eyebrow. "What did you see?" "I didn't see it." "What did you do?" Suddenly, my heart sank, and a ridiculous thought suddenly popped up in my brain. Only she can see this line? What's going on? At this moment, the red line suddenly lit up, as if it was ignited by something, emitting a warm and dazzling light. At the same time, a low sound came from the sky far away, like a thunder sound or something breaking. At the same time as Gu Chenfeng raised his head and saw a huge fireworks lit up in the night sky, and the rays of light illuminated the entire night market. "Is this smoke?" Su Chanshan ran over at some point, looking at the sky in surprise, her face full of shock. But I knew it was not an ordinary smoke. The shape of the fireworks was like a line of intertwinedness, with two vague figures hidden in the center, like the shadows of her and Gu Chenfeng. Her heart was beating fast, and the red rays on her wrist became more and more burning, as if she wanted to tell her something. "After all, your face is very bad. Why don't we go back first?" Gu Chenfeng's voice was filled with worry. He reached out to pull her, but he was stunned when he touched her wrist. "Do you feel it too?" He looked at him, with a hint of hope in his eyes. Ken Feng didn't say anything, but just looked down at his wrist, his face becoming a little complicated. Although he couldn't see the red line, he seemed to feel something, a throbbing that could not be said was transmitted from his wrist to his heart. The fireworks in the night sky are getting brighter and brighter, as if they are about to ignite the whole world. He was standing there, and his brain was in chaos. She didn't know what was going on, but she just told her that this reunion was more than just a coincidence. And just as the fireworks reached its brightest moment, behind an inconspicuous small trunk on the road, an old man in a long gray robe raised his head slowly, and a gleam flashed through his wild eyes. He murmured in a low voice, "The line of life has finally woken up." Although she didn't hear the sentence, she suddenly felt a flash behind her back, as if she was being targeted by someone. She turned subconsciously, only seeing a blank street and the radiance of fireworks that dissipated. Just as she stood on the road in the night market, the light of the fireworks in the night sky gradually dissipated, leaving an inexplicable sense of pressure that kept her from feeling relieved. She lowered her head and looked at the red ray on her wrist. Although the feeling of burning her hands had just disappeared, the hidden red line was still in her vision, as if reminding her that nothing was illusion. "After all, you're really fine, right? Your face is still very bad." Jane Chenfeng stood beside her, her eyebrows were tightly locked, and her language was full of worry. His hands were still on her shoulders, as if he was afraid that she would fall down any time. I'm fine. Maybe I'm too tired just now, I'm a little nervous." Xiaoran reluctantly smiled and tried to cover up the panic in his heart. She didn't want him to worry, nor did she want him to feel that she was talking nonsense. Even though she couldn't figure out what she had just seen. "Head? That won't work. We have to find a place to rest." Su Chanshan interjected from the side, and her face was full of concern. She looked around, then pointed to a small trellis from a distance and said, "There are people selling beverages there. I'll buy a bottle of water. Don't leave first." After saying that, she ran away without waiting for a quick reaction. I looked at her back and felt helplessly slamming my head, feeling a little grateful in my heart. Although Chanshan is careless, she can always make people feel at ease when she is concerned. "You're really okay?" The voice of Jane Chenfeng sounded again, and he tried in a low voice. He withdrew his hand, but he didn't retreat, still standing beside her, looking at her with his eyes as if he wanted to see something from her face. He was a little uncomfortable when he saw it. He lowered his head and pretended to tidy up his clothes, and said casually, "It's really okay, it's just that the smoke just was too bright and shining a little." "What about you?" Do you feel anything strange?" she asked carefully, her eyes secretly staring at his expression. Although she wasn't sure if he could see the red line, she remembered that when he touched her wrist, his face changed a little, as if he felt something. Gu Chenfeng was silent for a while, then gently shook his head. "It's nothing, maybe the smoke was too sudden," and he was stunned for a moment. "Don't think too much, just take a break." His language was calm, but he always thought he was ignoring something. She opened her mouth and wanted to ask again, but she felt that she might be too sensitive, so she closed her mouth and pointed her head. At this time, Su Chantian ran back with a bottle of mineral water, panting, and stuffed it into Xiaoran's hand. "Drink some water quickly, be calm." After taking the water, she opened the bottle and took a sip. The ice-cold liquid slid across her throat, making her brain more awake. She smiled reluctantly. "He's pretty, maybe there's an activity." "Event?" "I didn't hear it." Chantian slammed her head, then suddenly clapped her hands. "Oh, by the way, Chenfeng, you are a photographer, have you just taken a smoke? It must be super good-looking." Gu Chenfeng smiled, raised his camera and shook it. "I took a few photos and I will edit the picture later and I will post it for you to see." "That's great. Then I'll wait." Chantian was excited and took Xiaoran's hand. "Let's take a walk for a while. There seems to be a performance ahead, don't waste such a great time." Although I originally wanted to refuse, I still couldn't speak up when I looked at Chantian's expectant expression on her face. She glanced at Gu Chenfeng, and saw that he had no objection, so the three of them continued to move forward. "The crowd at the night market is still hot, but I can't calm down." Her video line swept over her wrist from time to time, and even though the red line no longer shines, it still exists, as if it will bring something again at any time. She tried hard to make herself focus on the front of her and Chantian's smile, but her brain kept thinking about the just-in-one fireworks and the two vague figures. "After all, look at this." Chantian suddenly stopped, pointed to the handmade artifact on a small trunk, and shouted excitedly. It was a small wood carving a pair of little people holding hands, and a small smoke pattern was carved beside it, which looked particularly exquisite. I walked over and looked down, and my heart suddenly jumped. The shape of the smoke is almost exactly the same as the fireworks in the night sky, and even the direction of the connecting strips is similar. She subconsciously reached out to touch her, and at the moment she touched the wood carving, she felt a faint vibration coming from her fingertips. "This thing is quite special," she said in a low voice, with uncertainty in the sound. She turned to look at the owner, a young uncle who looked a little old, wearing a plain gray shirt and was rubbing against other small objects on the position. "Uncle, where's this wood carving?" Xiaoran couldn't help asking, with a little curiosity in his language. The uncle raised his head, glanced at her, then grinned, revealing a bit of uneven teeth. "This is what I carved myself, and the spirit comes from an old story, saying it is the fireworks of fate that can bring evil people together. If you like it, take it and sell you cheaply." The fireworks of fate? Xiaoran's heart was shocked, and the scene in the night sky suddenly flashed through his brain. She was about to ask something else when she heard Gu Chenfeng open his mouth. "This story sounds interesting. Can you say more?" His voice was very casual, but there was a little exploration in his eyes, which seemed to be quite interested in the wood carving. The uncle smiled and snatched his hand. "It's nothing to say, it's just a rumor. He said that this firework will only appear at a certain time. Not many people have seen it, but as long as you see it, you can see your fate clearly. You young people can hear you as a happy boy, don't be too real." After hearing this, I couldn't feel happy at all. She looked down at the wood carving, her brain was filled with just a few fireworks and red lines. She didn't know if this was a coincidence, but she just told her that it was absolutely not simple. "After all, do you want to buy it? It's only 20 pieces of unpaid." Chantian came over and asked with a smile. After a while, he hesitated. He still ordered a little bit and took out the money from his bag and gave it to the uncle. She held the wood carving and felt indescribable in her heart, as if there was something between this little thing and her. The three of them left their seats and continued to move forward, but their minds were no longer shopping. She always touched the wood carvings in her hand, and then looked at the red tree on her wrist, and there was something terrible in her brain. Gu Chenfeng seemed a little absent-minded. Although he would occasionally chat with Qian, he was looking down at the camera most of the time, as if he was thinking about something. When the night market was about to end, it was already very late. Qian stretched out her waist and smiled and said, "I'm so happy tonight." "Of course, let's come tomorrow." "Chenfeng, you are together too?" Gu Chenfeng smiled and pointed, "Okay, as long as you don't mind my troubles." "Why is it going to be troublesome? How can you be so hot for so many people?" Qian clapped her hands, then turned to the head and said to Xiaoran, "That's it, so you can't let go of the dung at the moment." I suddenly felt a little nervous, and I had no idea. She is just a strange thing now, so she is in the mood to think about tomorrow. After sending Qian home, Gu Chenfeng took the initiative to send her back. The two people walked on the deserted streets, the dim light of the road lights stretched their shadows, and there was an indescribable silence in the air. "After all, today, do you have anything to say?" I was stunned for a moment, and my heart was nervous. She did have many questions, such as the fireworks just now, such as whether he felt anything unusual, but these words turned into silence when they were right around her mouth. She looked down at the tip of her feet and said in a low voice, "It's nothing, I just think it's a coincidence today and I can meet you." Wei Chenfeng looked at her without saying anything, as if waiting for her to continue. But then he didn't open his mouth anymore, just raised his head and smiled at him. "What about you? What do you want to say?" He was silent for a while, then slammed his head and said with a smile, "It's nothing, it's just that, if you haven't seen it for 8 years, you still haven't changed much." Suddenly, my heart thumped, and I didn't answer, but just kept my head down and continued. The two of them walked in front and behind until they arrived under her house. "Then I'll go up first, be careful on the way." He stood at the entrance of the building and turned to him. Gu Chen was at a loss, but he didn't rush to leave, but took out his phone from his pocket, clicked it a few times, and then said, "I've sent you the photos I just made. Let's take a look when I have time." I immediately clicked and took out my phone and saw that I received a message. The photo shows her under the tree, smiling a little, and the background is dim lights and the shadow of the old tree, which is indeed quite touching. "It's a good shot, thank you," she said softly, then shrugged his hand at him and turned into the building. When I got home, I was lying on the bed, and my brain was still a mess. She took out the wood carving and put it under the bedlight to look carefully. The pattern of the smoke was particularly clear under the light, as if it would live any time. She lowered her head and looked at her wrist. The red line still existed. Although it was very light, it was there. "What the hell is going on?" she murmured in a low voice, suddenly flashing the uncle's words in her brain. "The fireworks of life can bring evil people together. Anyone else? Are she and Gu Chenfeng?" I suddenly slammed my head and thought this idea was too ridiculous. There was a voice in Curson telling her that it was no coincidence. At this moment, the phone suddenly blew, and it was a new piece of news. She picked it up and saw that it was from Gu Chenfeng. "After all, I haven't posted a few photos of today. I'll see you tomorrow. Also, I want to talk to you about something. Are you free tomorrow?" As soon as I looked at this news, my heartbeat suddenly accelerated. She hesitated for a moment, and replied, "Okay, see you tomorrow." Putting down her phone, she lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling in a daze. What will be waiting for her tomorrow? What does Jason Feng want to say? And what does this red line and firework mean? These problems were like a terrible group, which made her unable to sleep well for a night. The next morning, a pair of dark eyes suddenly came out. She and Gu Chenfeng met at a small coffee shop in the city center. Qian was unable to come together at any time, so they were the only two. The environment of the cafe is very peaceful, with several pots of green planted beside the windows, and the sun shines through the glass, giving people a very comfortable feeling. When he arrived, Gu Chenfeng was already sitting by the window, with a notebook computer and his camera on his hand, looking down at the screen. "Come on, sit down." He raised his head, smiled at her, and then turned the computer screen over. "Look at these photos, taken yesterday." I sat down and looked down. There were several photos of the night market on the screen, including those who were smiling and choosing gadgets, as well as special works of the old tree and the roadside. But what made her heart beat the most was the last fireworks in the night sky. In the photo, the light of the fireworks was unusually lit, and there were about 2 figures in the center. Although they were blurry, they could tell at a glance that it was the silhouette of her and Gu Chenfeng. "You saw it too?" She raised her head, trembling with a little bit of trembling in her voice. Kazuki did not answer directly, but closed his computer, leaned against the back of the chair, looking at her with a complicated look. "Still, the fireworks yesterday were not simple. When I took a photo, I felt a very strange throbbing, as if something was pulling me." I suddenly felt shocked, but I didn't expect him to say it so bluntly. She hesitated for a moment, and decided to confess. "I saw something yesterday, a red line connecting me and you, only I can see it. And the fireworks, as if, were telling me something." After hearing the sound of the song Chenfeng, his eyebrows became even tighter. He was silent for a while, and then said in a low voice, "After all, this may be more complicated than we thought. When I returned home yesterday, I checked some information and found that there were some strange stories in the night market before, which were related to fate." "Fate?" Suddenly his heart thumped, and his brain flashed the wood carving and the uncle's words. "Yes, I don't know the specifics, but I think we have to figure out what's going on." I looked at him and felt mixed emotions. She knew that this might be a road full of unknowns, but looking at Gu Chenfeng's eyes, she suddenly felt that no matter what was ahead, as long as he was there, it seemed that it was not that scary. "Okay, check it out together." She clicked the head, and the sound was light, but it was very sure. Jane Chenfeng smiled, smiling a little like when he was a child, with a little bit of balm and warmth. "Then let's just say it. In the afternoon, I have a friend who knows some old objects and experts on the topic. We can go to him first." When I was about to start, I felt a sense of indescribableness in my heart. This road may change a lot of things, not only the relationship between her and Gu Chenfeng, but also more things that she could not predict. In the afternoon, they came to an old street together. There were some old buildings on both sides of the street, and the air was filled with a breath of old. Gu Chenfeng took her to an inconspicuous shop, with an old sign hanging from the door, "Riding Cloud Antiques." Pushed the door and a faint smell of sandalwood came over the side. The light in the store is dim and the shelves are filled with all kinds of old objects, from porcelain to ancient books, everything. Behind the cabinet was an old man in a long gray robe. His hair was gray and his eyes were half closed, as if he was asleep. "Old Yun, I'm here to bring my friends." Gu Chenfeng shouted lightly, with a little familiarity in his language. The old man opened his eyes quietly, swept his eyes over them, then stopped on the red robe on Ji Ran's wrist, and slightly raised his mouth. "The line of life is indeed you." I was surprised in my heart and felt that the old man's eyes seemed to be able to see through everything. She was about to ask, but she saw Mr. Yun stand up and walk over slowly, and said in a low voice, "Come on, kids, some things should be known to you." When they looked at Gu Chenfeng, they saw doubts and tension in the other party's eyes. They followed Mr. Yun into a hut in the store, and there was a sense of premonition in their hearts, which might be hidden in all the answers they wanted to know. Xiao Chenfeng followed Mr. Yun into the hut, and his heart was like a little rabbit in his arms, pounding. The light in the cottage is darker than outside, and only a little light from the windows is shining through, making Chenjie and the house feel confused. There was a faint smell of grass in the air, mixed with the breath of the old wood, which made people feel a little stressed. There is an old wooden table in the middle of the room, with a few yellow books and a copper plate that looks a little old. There are some strange patterns engraved in the plate, like some symbol. "Sit down, don't be restrained." Old Yun's voice was low and slow. He pointed to the 2 chairs beside the table, and sat slowly to the opposite side. His eyes looked back at them, as if he could see through every thought in their hearts. After sitting down, my hands unconsciously clamped the red rosy on my wrist, and my heart was up and down. She glanced at Gu Chenfeng and saw that although he looked calm on the surface, His fingers were lightly knocking on the table, obviously not completely relaxed. She cleared her throat and plucked up her courage and asked, "Old Yun, what does the line of life mean? Do you know about this red color?" Old Yun did not answer directly, but picked up an old book from the table, slowly opened it, and muttered something that he didn't understand in his mouth. After a while, he raised his head and a gleam flashed in his eyes. This red ray is not an ordinary thing. It is the appearance of the line of fate. Only a few people can see it, and only evil people can be led by it. You can meet at this time and then touch the fire of fate. It shows that the elves between you have long been written into fate. I was stunned for a moment, and I felt ridiculous and indescribable. She lowered her head and looked at her wrist. The red line was still as if it was a seal of Old Yun. She couldn't help asking, "Fate? It's too mysterious to hear." "Then what's the red line? Why is the only one who can see it?" Mr. Yun smiled, smiling a little profoundly and unpredictable. "This line is the bridge between your heart and your heart. It not only allows you to see the elbow, but also allows you to perceive the direction of your destiny, and even change it at some moments. But this power cannot be used at will. If you use it well, it can make you closer to each other. If you use it poorly, the consequences are not something you can bear." When Gu Chenfeng interjected at this time, his language was filled with doubts. "Old Yun, what do you mean is that this line can change fate? But it doesn't sound so reckless. Yesterday's fireworks and the red lines I saw immediately, isn't it a coincidence or illusion?" Old Yun snatched his head and knocked his fingers on the table. "Coincidence? Phantom? Young man, you feel it too. When the fireworks appeared yesterday, the palpitations in your heart were not fake. Your fate has long been connected by this line. The fireworks are just a signal of fate, telling you that you can't avoid the right one." When he looked at Gu Chenfeng, he saw shock and confusion in the other party's eyes. "Suddenly, my heart was full of pictures with Gu Chenfeng when I was a child. The laughter, quarrel, and even the helplessness and regrets that broke up seemed to be hooked by this red line, and they all came up." She bit her lip and asked in a low voice, "Then what should we do? Since this line has appeared, there must be a solution, right?" Mr. Yun didn't rush to answer, but took out a small bottle of ink green liquid from under the table, placed it next to the copper plate, and said, "Solve it? This is not a problem, it is a stock of incisiveness. If you want to truly understand the meaning of this line, you have to complete a fire of fireworks. This stock allows you to see each other's past and future, and also allows you to decide whether to change the direction of this line, or accept it as it was." "Shirt?" Gu Chenfeng raised his eyebrows, his lingering skeptic. "It sounds like he is making a movie. What exactly should I do?" Old Yun pointed to the copper plate, and his voice was as low as a story. "Tonight, midnight, at the highest place in the city, bring this red and this bottle of medicine, pour them into the copper plate, and then light up a fire. Your intentions will turn into new fireworks to illuminate the truth of your fate. But remember, this ritual can only be done once, and you can't get back to the head after doing it. You have to think clearly, whether to change or accept it." I heard my heart beat faster and my palms were sweating. She turned to look at Gu Chenfeng, and saw that he was also looking at her, with a complex look that could not be described. She knew that this was not a simple decision, and changing her fate was very intimidating, but the consequences of Mr. Yun said made her a little scared. "Old Mr. Yun, what would happen if we didn't do the ceremony?" she tried to ask. Old Yun narrowed his eyes, his language became a little cold. "Don't do it. Then this line will keep you, the regrets of the past, the current trauma, and even the pain in the future will follow you like a shadow until you are crushed. Do you think that fate can escape by chance?" This was like a heavy note, hitting Xiaoran's heart. She suddenly remembered the separation 8 years ago. Her family moved away all night due to debt problems and had no chance to say goodbye to Gu Chenfeng. At that time, she hoped to see him again. She said sorry, but she actually forced them to break them up. If this line can really change something, should she try it? Gu Chenfeng was silent for a while, and then said in a low voice, "After all, we have to decide on this matter together. What do you think?" I bit my lip and my heart was so irritated. She knew that no matter which path she chose, it could change the relationship between them, and even their lives. She took a deep breath and finally said, "Try it. If we don't do it, we may never be able to untie this." Gu Chenfeng looked at her, her eyes flashed with a gentle flash, and then turned to old Yun and said, "Okay, let's do it. Tonight, midnight, where's the highest place?" Old Yun grinned and pointed to a high building far outside the window. "That's the top of the Starlight Building. Don't come at midnight." After leaving Yunjiu, he and Gu Chenfeng walked on the old street. Both of them didn't say anything, and their hearts seemed to be filled with stones. He looked down at the small bottle and copper plate in his hand, and his brain was full of old man's words. She knew that tonight's decision might change everything. After all, if the stance can really change the fate, what do you want to change? Gu Chenfeng suddenly stopped his pace, his voice as low as if he was talking to himself. He was stunned for a moment, turned to look at him, seeing a piece of emotion hidden in his eyes that she couldn't understand. She hesitated for a while before she said in a low voice, "I don't know, maybe it was the separation from the scene 8 years ago. If we could not leave so suddenly, maybe we wouldn't have such regrets. What about you?" Gu Chenfeng didn't answer directly, but just smiled, smiling a little bitterly. "Me? Maybe it's about the same. After you left that year, I looked for you for a long time, and then I heard that your house moved far away before giving up. But I always thought in my heart that I had said less. As soon as I heard this, my heart seemed to be stabbed by something." She lowered her head and walked in silence, both of them walking in silence until the sky became dark. At 11:30 p.m., they arrived at the top of Starlight Building. This is the highest viewing platform in the city. There are many people usually, but it is already empty at night, and there is only a cold wind blowing, making people feel a little lonely. He immediately put the copper plate on the ground and poured his hands into the bottle of ink green medicine with a little shake. The liquid flows slowly in the plate, reflecting the night, emitting a strange light. Gu Chenfeng squatted beside her, took out a lighter from her pocket, and said in a low voice, "Are you ready?" I suddenly noticed a little, and my heartbeat was so fast that it was about to pop out. She lowered her head and looked at the red line on her wrist. The red line suddenly lit up at this moment, as if she felt something. Gu Chenfeng took a deep breath and lit the lighter. The small flame swayed in the wind, and then he carefully placed it on the edge of the copper plate. The fire suddenly burst out, and the medicine seemed to be ignited, and a low sound came out, which then turned into a green flame that jumped in the copper plate. Suddenly, he took a step back at the same time as Gu Chenfeng, and watched in surprise as the flames became more and more prosperous, gradually forming a small fireworks, floating in the air. "This is..." Xiaoran's eyes widened, his voice trembling. She suddenly felt her wrist hot, and the red line seemed to be led by flames, making it clearer, and even a same line appeared on Gu Chenfeng's wrist. "Sure, look at that." Gu Chenfeng suddenly pointed at the center of the fireworks, his language was filled with shock. He looked over with his hand and saw a picture appearing in the center of the fireworks. It was when they were young, 2 children were running in the alley, smiling carelessly. The picture flashed and turned into the day when her house moved out. She sat in the car, staring out the window with swaying eyes, while Gu Chenfeng stood at the entrance of the alley, staring blankly at the car. His heart seemed to be pulled hard, and his eyes were uncontrollably swept up. She bit her lips tightly, her voice choked. "So, you've been at the entrance of the alley." Wei Chenfeng didn't say anything, but just held her hand silently, and the warmth in her palm made her feel a little relieved. The picture of fireworks continues to change, and then there are clips of their future. They are laughing together at the night market, they are arguing on a park chair, and they are standing in a strange place, with their backs on their backs, as if they can't walk any further. Is this our future? As soon as I looked at those pictures, my heart was filled with silence. She suddenly understood what Mr. Yin said, changing fate meant. If they choose to change, or they may erase those bad clips, but is that really right? The voice of Gu Chenfeng rose at this time, low and determined. After all, no matter what the future is, I don't want to change the past. I couldn't say anything you left that year, but now I'm still waiting for you. I've been waiting for you, no matter how long. He was stunned and turned to look at him, seeing that he had a serious eye. A string in her heart seemed to be being swung, and her eyes could no longer be stopped, and she slid down her face. She choked and said, I've always felt sorry for you, but I don't have the courage to go find you. The two of them looked at each other, and the night wind blew over and took away some heavy weight. The fireworks suddenly became brighter at this time, as if they were feeling their hearts. The light in the center turned into a line, forming a huge smoke flower that shone towards the night sky and illuminated the entire city. As soon as he looked at the fireworks, the red line on his wrist faded away, as if he had fulfilled its mission. She suddenly felt a lot relaxed, as if she had let go of something. She turned her head and looked at Gu Chenfeng and said lightly, "We will not change our fate. The regrets of the past will let it go, whether it is good or bad in the future, we will face it together." Gu Chenfeng smiled, smiling as bright as when he was a child. He clicked a little and held her hand tightly. "Okay, let's face it together." The light of the fireworks gradually dissipated, and the night sky became calm, but I knew that some things were no longer the same. The collar between them does not require red lines to prove, nor does it require ritual change. The true fate is the moment when they choose each other. The night wind blew, and the city lights flashed under the feet. It was just leaning on Gu Chenfeng's shoulder, and for the first time I felt that no matter what happened in the future, it would be no longer so terrible. The two of them sat quietly, looking at the night, as if countless people were waiting for them to go to see each other tomorrow.